Well, I mean, the best way to start if we're really doing a T20 league would be to basically bring in someone who doesn't know much about T20 cricket at all, stopped watching cricket in the 90s, and then they pick the players that they most want to have selfies with. That's how T20 leagues are actually run, Gaurav. Am I wrong?
Absolutely right.
It's time for another dream team on ESPN Cricinfo. We put our heads together and try and come up with the ideal 11 for any given topic. And today we're going to be picking the best T20 team all time. Now, we put our heads together at Cricinfo and we tend to bring out the very best team we possibly can. But last time when we tried to pick the best current Test 11, we somehow ended up with Rohit Sharma as an opener. In light of those events, I've decided to completely revamp the selection panel and bring in some new faces and reduce the average age of the selection committee, which I think is a must for T20 cricket. So it's time to say hello to Gaurav Sundararaman, who of course is associated with everything to do with T20 cricket on Cricinfo. Gaurav, good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that too, this is the T20 season, isn't it? We are almost like a week away from a potential IPL final, which is not happening anyway. So
Matt Roller joins us as well from our illustrious offices in the UK. Matt, trust you're doing well.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
And finally, Jarrod Kimber is a man that wears many hats. I'm not sure about the one he's worn at the moment, but regardless of that, he's been with Cricinfo over the years as a writer, producer, and since then has become a fancier man in T20 cricket, worked with the St. Lucia Stars, where he also became general manager with the Melbourne Stars, has also consulted a number of other franchises around the world and worked directly with players. Jarrod, you're a fancy man these days.
Yeah, I basically will work for anyone, and being that this is going up on Cricinfo, if you'd like to hire me for anything, if you'd like me to analyse you in any way, personally or professionally, feel free to send it through. The amount of jobs I've lost in the last year, even before the coronavirus, is maybe setting records, but we'll talk about that strike rate later.
So just to add some credibility to this panel, like I said, Jarrod has worked with the St. Lucia Stars in the CPL, the Melbourne Stars in the Big Bash. He's also consulted Nottingham as well as RCB in the IPL. He's worked with players directly. Gaurav, on the other hand, in his time before Cricinfo, has consulted Mumbai Indians as well as RCB. So nothing that we've actually got two people that have consulted Royal Challengers Bangalore. Nothing that spells success more than two guys who've consulted RCB for an all-time T20 11. Matt, do you have any such fancy claims to your CV?
My claim to fame, unlike these two, is that I've not assisted RCB in any way, so I'm not associated with any of those glorious failures over the years.
And in light of recent events, I'm not just going to be convening and moderating this panel. I'll also be giving my selection inputs too, given how it all turned out last time. So I'm a bit like the Bangladesh Cricket Board here, where I can bring in the selectors, but eventually I'll just push my word through with them. Anyway, as far as my own credibility goes, I've actually done more videos on the PSL than anybody else in Cricinfo history. So the PSL, remember that? The forgotten child of T20 franchise cricket, doesn't get to play in its own home as well. I have done a lot of PSL videos with Sakle and Mushtaq, so that is where I will be pushing the cause for the Pakistan Super League. Anyway, Jarrod, I'm going to start with you. It's tough sometimes to pick between franchise T20 cricket and the way it's run, and then there's also T20 I cricket. So where do we start? Can we put one league above the rest?
Look, the IPL is, I think when you do any sort of statistical analysis, the IPL is the best league. PSL, weirdly, usually is second, despite the fact I think a lot of people think Big Bash. And then international T20 is so, there's a big difference between, Oman versus Kenya, which is an international T20 compared to India versus Australia. So I think usually the IPL, the PSL, and then the Big Bash are sort of the three sort of ultimate leagues. And then you've sort of got maybe the Blast is second tier, and then you've got South Africa, New Zealand, and the CPL under that. And international cricket, you kind of have to take some of it, with a grain of salt, just because you don't know who they're playing against all the time.
So very quickly, before we start, the parameters for picking this team, we're going to be picking an all-time T20 team. Remember, this is all-time, so it's not about current form and current players. It's also T20s and not just international T20 cricket. And at the same time, there are no nationality limits, no purse limits. So it's just a complete no-holds-barred all-time T20 11 that we're picking. Let's get straight into it. Let's start at the top of the order. And Chris Gayle is the first name that we have to mention as we talk about our openers. I mean, I don't know, should we run a poll? That always ends well when we do a poll on Chris Gayle for Cricinfo. Jarrod?
That was fun. I mean, Chris Gayle I think there's about 6 or 7 guys who are automatic selections. I think he's an automatic selection. He tactically doesn't believe in singles, which if you bat like him makes sense. And every time he used to run a quick single, he used to do his hamstring. So, it makes sense that he doesn't play that way. I'm just saying that I think he's the best T20 batsman of all time. And maybe not the most perfect T20 batsman. AB de Villiers and Andre Russell might be slightly more perfect, but I think he's doing the best over the longest period.
Maybe there's an argument that Gayle might be the best player of all time, but maybe he's not in the best team of all time, and that he's quite a tricky person to partner at the top because of the fact that sometimes he will play those innings like you remember the World T20 final in 2012, or I think it was 3 or 15 or 16 against Sri Lanka, and that really negatively impacts a team. So sometimes having a slow starter can be a problem, but then you sort of zoom out a bit more and remember that he's got 13,000 runs, 2,200s, strikes at 150, highest score in the format. Like he's the pinnacle of T20 batting. I think you have to pick him. The question then is, as Jarrod says, who becomes the best partner for him? My suggestion for number 2, I don't think would actually work that well in a partnership with him, but I think personally that you have to pick David Warner as well because of how good he's been over the past probably 5 years. I think it's easy to sort of take for granted how good he's been since he joined Sunrisers, but he's averaging 55 for them with an average of 150 strike rate of 150, I should say. And I think he's won 3 orange caps. He's brilliant against spin and pace. He's brilliant. He's proved himself in Australia and in India. So I think that despite the fact that's quite an awkward opening partnership because he's so good between the wickets, I think that's what I've ended up with.
Well, here you go. I've got a story about this if you want, Raunak.
Go on, Jarrod. Yeah.
I obviously worked with Davey at St. Lucia. And we had Rakeem Cornwall as our opener. Now, Rakeem Cornwall's a slightly different kind of athlete than Chris Gayle, but very similar in the fact he basically just stands there and whacks the ball. And so I had a meeting with Davey and I said, look, you're the best runner between the wickets in the world. If we open the batting with you and Rakeem Cornwall, is that not going to be a problem? And he was quite honest. He said, look, I might be able to work a way around it. But yeah, I get my innings going by singles and twos. I basically look to chip and find gaps to start with. And then when I get in, I start to look for the boundaries a bit more. So it is, if we are looking for a realistic team, I think, I can understand why that might be a problem. So the better option might be either looking at the all-round version. So that would be Shane Watson, who can quite easily sit there and slap the ball himself, or Aaron Finch, who probably has almost as good a record as David Warner, maybe even slightly better a record altogether around the world. He, to be fair to Finchy, I think if you said to Finchy, you don't have to run, I think he'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned Shane Watson because I rate Shane Watson very highly. I mean, just the sheer longevity that he's had in T20 cricket, he continues to be such a premium asset. I mean, over 8,500 runs in the format and at his prime, an all-round option too. So I have a lot of time for Shane Watson. I'm hoping at some point we can find a place for him in this team. But it's a nice trend you all have started. Chris Gayle and who with him? So Gaurav, let me go to you as well. Chris Gayle and who for you?
Yeah, so Gayle is obviously a no-brainer. And I also had Warner as my opener. See, it's not about just running between wickets. It's about other things. Warner adds so much dimension to the field as well. I think among all the players we discussed, Warner's fielding is easily the best. And that's very important. As Matt said, Warner has the game to actually bat through. And in a world T20 dream team, which has a lot of hitters, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of hitters. We need that one batsman who's likely to bat through the innings, and Warner could be that particular batsman. So I would have Gayle and Warner up there in the opening as the opening combination. And look, in T20, you need to be very dynamic. We all have seen that. The batting positions are going to go away very soon. I don't think batting position should even be there in T20s, according to me, because it all depends on the situation and the balls left. So I think we can even fit in a guy like Watson somewhere down the order at number 3. But as an opening combination, I would go for Gayle and Warner.
Can I throw in one option? I think we might be about to say the same thing, Jarrod, but I was going to throw in Narayan as a possibility because I'm sure he'll end up getting in with the ball for all of us. And it as a sort of quite a fun opening partnership, there would be almost zero running between the wickets with Narine and Gayle. But
the only other name I would throw in is Brendan McCullum, because of, he put T20 sort of on a map in many ways, and also for a captaincy. He's the only other name I would put in, but I have no problem with it being Warner. I just wanted to point out all those other little things. And as Gaurav says, he can actually field.
Okay, so we've locked down Gayle and Warner as our openers. So let's move on then to positions 3, 4, and 5. Jarrod, can we isolate a number 3 for this team, or should we look at 3, 4 together? What are your thoughts?
For me, the next guy who's the most obvious is AB de Villiers. I think his record at number 3 is, I think he averages 40 at a strike rate of almost 10 runs and over. If that's the case, then he's in, and then there is no other name. So I'm sorry to, other great players like Suresh Raina, but he doesn't, they're not in that conversation.
It's a unanimous choice, at least for me.
So I actually had AB down at 4. And had what I imagine will be quite an unpopular choice of Glenn Maxwell as number 3. So my thinking with Maxwell was I think he can pretty much bat anywhere in this team, but can come up or down depending on situations. He's opened, he's batted 3, he's batted 4, and he's batted 5. All of them with success, I think.
The thing about Glenn Maxwell is, and I think Gaurav will agree with me, we all agree that he's failed in the IPL, right? Over all these years that he's got ample opportunity, he's gone for big money year after year. And from note, the only year that he actually made an impact was 2014, and that too just the UAE leg of the tour. So given the tremendous talent that he has, I don't think Glenn Maxwell has done justice to that at all. And I think we will find players that will make a stronger case to be in this team, those that have been successful in the IPL. I don't know, what do you make of that, Gaurav?
Yeah, the fact is that the problem with Maxwell I have is the consistency. We don't know which Maxwell you're going to get. And whereas with ABD, there's some kind of stability, there's some kind of hope that I know that ABD will score more consistently than Glenn Maxwell. If at all I'm considering Glenn Maxwell, it might be maybe lower down the order, but at number 3, I think I want ABD to get in there as fast as possible.
I've got ABDV at 3 and I've got Maxwell at 4. And it would be entirely dependent on different situations. I think if the power play happens, I might want Maxwell in there, just because I think that AB there's still a part of his brain that thinks like a batsman sometimes, and he might think I want to get out of it. Whereas I think with Maxwell, if you threw him in the power play, he doesn't know how to think like a batsman, which I see why he's failed at times in the IPL. But I think as a general rule, I think that is why you want him in this particular side, the ability to go as hard and as fast as he can at almost in all situations.
Okay, so I've got AB at 4 as well, and that's because I make a strong case now for Virat Kohli at 3, and I don't know if I can convince you guys, but for me, definitely the best white ball player of his generation, sensational T20 I record, hugely prolific, and a huge impact in World T20s. That knock at Mohali in 2016, I think, is the best T20 innings played, let alone best T20 I innings. So for me, I rate Virat Kohli very highly. I also look at this team, and I think he's the most all-round batsman. We are going to now pick a lot of hitters for T20s. We're going to pick Russell and Pollard and talk about them. So for me, Kohli is the best all-round package that you can get at number 3, fits just perfectly. Also, I just think there are too many hit-and-miss sort of players, and therefore Virat Kohli is needed here. The other thing is that I think he's a better player than Smith. So I'm not even mentioning Smith or Williamson in the same breath as Kohli in T20 cricket. And in spite of that strike rate of 130, I think there is a case to be made for Kohli because of the impact that he has, and beyond the numbers, just for the sheer type of batsman that he is. You want this team, an all-time T20 team, to be able to chase under pressure, big scores against top quality opposition. For me, you need a batsman like Kohli for that.
Is he in your top 7 best players ever in T20s is what we need to discuss here, and not his how good he is. I'm sure Kohli is amazing. He will walk into most teams. Does he fit in here? If he doesn't fit in 1, 2, and 3, I don't think there is room for him. He doesn't fit in 1, 2 now. So the only spot we're talking is at number 3, and then we need to shift ABD to number 4. But do we need a Kohli in this team? I think we can. If you ask me, you just need to wait and see whom we pick at 4 to 7, and then see if Kohli can come in at 3.
Or if we needed someone whose job it was to come in and bat throughout the innings at 4, that sort of traditional player that franchises love. You put your best batsman at 4, and then he can handle the best opposition spinner and take the innings deep. Virat Kohli is actually perfect for that. The thing is, though, that's not an all-time position that we need to fill in, being that we have Andre Russell and these other guys that come in later. So I don't see how Virat gets in ahead of anyone else in this particular team. And I think he's probably the best all-position player in the world. But I think Steve Smith's pretty handy as well. I'm not going to put him in the team either.
No, and the thing is, if we're discussing Glenn Maxwell at 3, then I think there's a much stronger case to be made for Virat Kohli. I mean, forget sheer consistency. Fact remains that if we're saying that the IPL is the best league in the world, I think we can surely find 11 players that have been successful in the IPL to make an all-time T20 11. So for me, if we're discussing a number 3 and we're looking at Maxwell, I'm sort of pushing Kohli's case a lot stronger there. And like I said, there's probably a case to be made for a Virat Kohli in spite of the strike rate of 130 and in spite of numbers that other players may have better than him.
My number 4 was MSD. Because we need that one player who can actually, you can be 20 for 2 or even 20 for 3, and you just need that one insurance player in 11. I know like there's a big line of thinking where you need all 11 hitters or 9 hitters in a team. But I think when you have a dream team and you're bound to collapse someday and you're bound to have 20 for 3 situations. And that time a guy like MS Dhoni is the best, and he can bat deep, and we all know what else he offers. I don't even want to get to that point of discussing about his captaincy and other things. So my number 4 is MSD.
Right. Gaurav's put in MS Dhoni. So Jarrod, do you have Dhoni in your team?
Yeah, I wouldn't bat him at 4, but I think Butler will probably end up being a better batsman than Dhoni. Just because I think the game's changed a little bit and he has maybe more weapons than Dhoni. He hasn't worked everything out yet, but at the moment I think Dhoni is still is ahead of him. And also I think we have to be a little bit realistic that we need a captain. So basically, if we're going to have another insurance player, Dhoni, because of his wicket-keeping skill, because of his captaincy skill, and because of his T20 hitting, I think makes sense further down the list.
My alternative to that was to have AB keeping Pollard 5, Russell 6, and then Afridi in as the sort of wild card at number 7 to guarantee you 4 overs. But obviously, I'm not going to argue about Dhoni. I think he's such a legend in T20 cricket that, I think it in a lot of ways it makes more sense than forcing the gloves on de Villiers when he only did it in probably, I don't know, a third of his total appearances.
Okay, I've got Dhoni as well, and for the simple reason, let alone all the things that have already been said about him. But if you are going to have a team of multinational identities and transnational personalities, and you need to bring all of them together and actually play like a team, so you need a captain, that's probably the best at his game than anyone else's. So there is Dhoni, the captain, so he makes my team easy. The other thing we need to discuss is, will any Pakistani make this team? I mean, Matt's just thrown in Shahid Afridi.
I think Shahid Afridi would make the squad, for instance, of 15. Mm-hmm. I don't see how he makes the team at the moment, but he's certainly on my list.
Well, he's still young, Shahid Afridi, so you never know. Okay, so it looks like we're all frozen in on Dhoni, which means if I just look at that team again, we fixed up Gayle and Warner as our openers. We've got AB de Villiers and MS Dhoni locked so far and ready to go. So it's time to talk about the all-rounders. I think this is a section that we may all agree on a lot more than perhaps others. So, Jarrod, can we all agree on the all-rounders now as we start that discussion?
Yeah, I mean, Andre Russell probably just sneaks in, doesn't he? The only thing I would say on Andre Russell, and I think it always has to be mentioned, is that he did have a drug suspension. And I think it's unfair not to mention that, because most of the other guys on this list will not have drug suspensions. And that is, if you're a power player and you're bowling at 90 miles an hour and you're hitting sixes and you also had a suspension for drugs, I think that has to be part of it. I would think if you were if all these players were fully fit and available, he would be the number one pick you would pick of any player in the history of T20 cricket, because of his bowling, his batting, and his fielding.
I really like that you mentioned that about Andre Russell, Jarrod, because I think it's such a big part of his career, and yet it isn't mentioned enough. So great player that he is. I'm glad that you have mentioned it. I had my own doubts, and it tends to cast aspersions on the quality or the purity of Andre Russell, the T20 player. But the fact remains, when he came back for KKR, from suspension, 2019, last year's IPL, he was massive in terms of the impact that he had. So that for me was the final stamp of approval that this player is good enough regardless of that asterisk in his career. So I like that you mentioned it, but yeah, Andre Russell definitely good enough to make it into this team. Should we discuss Pollard with him and just lock Pollard as well there? I don't think there'll be too many arguments against Kieron Pollard.
So Raunak, while I was trying to fill in positions 5, 6, and 7, I saw 4 people who actually fit in there. Pollard, Russell, Bravo, and Shane Watson. Obviously, Pollard and Russell are automatic choices for me, and I think both are amazing T20 cricketers. Pollard has lived and died T20 cricket. He's amazing, and he's won many matches for various franchises. He can captain as well. So Pollard and Russell make it. And the third position is where I'm kind of split. I'm okay with either Bravo or Shane Watson, but in my 11 I had Bravo surely because he has 497 wickets, and that's like imagine leaving Muthaiya Muralidharan out of your Test team or the ODI team. So it's like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have Bravo. Bravo didn't even make my 19.
Why is that, Jarrod?
Look, I think he's a phenomenal player, but we are talking about the best of all time here. And I think that he worked out very early on that if he bowled at the death and he bowled his slower balls, he'd take wickets. But he also he's got an above, he's a death specialist with an above average economy rate at the death for most of that time. So he's actually gone for more runs than an average player would have in that period, while taking more wickets, but wickets aren't worth much at the death. So he's taken 497 wickets in a period where most of those wickets are, number 7s and number 8s from around T20 cricket in the world, just swinging, and they're not that good to begin with, most number 7, number 8s in franchise cricket. On top of that, as good as his batting is, again, a bit like Shahid Afridi, he's probably a better batsman well before T20 cricket ever existed. He's played some phenomenal innings, and he's still a good batsman, but I just don't see him being strong enough to be in this team. I think Pollard is an automatic player. As a long on or long off, he might be the best in the world because you can't hit the ball over him because he's 19 foot tall, and he's got an incredible arm and a brilliant fielder as well. So, I think Pollard and Russell are absolutely dead on. The only other player... If we do, I think Maxwell, if Maxwell isn't in our top 4, Maxwell has to come back into this conversation here, and he may be more suited.
Guys, what about Shane Watson? So we can still afford to have him at the top 3 and maybe push everybody by one position. The fact is, the reason I'm bringing Shane Watson again is because do we need 5 bowlers, 5 proper bowlers? Is Andre Russell your 5th bowler? Will he be able to bowl 4 overs every single match? Is something we need to talk about. I feel with Watson or Bravo around, that problem is technically solved. So I still feel that there is a case for Shane Watson, and he was outstanding in the World T20 Is as well.
Right, and before I go to Matt again, look, I've said it before, I'm a big fan of Shane Watson. I really wish we find a place for him in this team. And the point on Bravo, as good as he's been, GS, I'm inclined to think that we will, in a little while from now, discuss Malinga, Bumrah, and there will be better bowlers to bowl at the death than Dwayne Bravo. So if Bravo's greatest skill to contribute in T20s is bowling at the death, and if you have people that can do that job better than him, then I think there's a case to be made, against Bravo in this team. Anyway, Matt, Russell and Pollard?
I ended up having... so Maxwell, Pollard, and Russell splitting the overs, but it will come down to a call on balance, I think, as much as anything else.
Okay. I think what we can do is we can leave one slot open for now and come back to it after we've discussed the bowlers. I think we will have plenty to say about the bowling options as well. And looking at that, perhaps we can then come back and see who best fits into this one all-rounder slot. So we've got obviously Maxwell, Bravo, and Shane Watson, potentially to take this final spot when we come back to it. But let's talk about the bowlers now. I don't see much of a debate on Lasith Malinga. But let's talk about the bowlers together as a cluster, perhaps. GS, why don't you kick us off with the spinners and the rest of the bowling?
Both Narine and Rashid make these games. Basically, now with both of them in the squad, it will be a 12-over game or a 14-over game because it's very hard to hit Narine and Rashid. Narine at his peak, almost every game KKR had, they had to just play out Narain, and the pressure increases. They are players who can easily increase the required run rate. And people play the reputation. People play the fact that they can spin the ball both ways. They're not able to read the ball. So what people end up doing is just try to play out those 24 balls. And I've seen in various coaches talking about Sunil Narain and Rashid Khan and about strategies evolving around these bowlers that just play them out. Even if you get 24 runs from their 4 overs, we can manage with other bowlers. But yes, this is a dream team. If I don't get Rashid, I'm going to get Narain. If I don't get Narain, I'm going to get Malinga. I'm going to get Bumrah. So that's how it has to be, right? The world's best team should have your 5 best bowlers. So I have Narain and Rashid as my spinners.
Great. I think Rashid Khan, with just sheer impact that he's had in the IPL year after year and in leagues across the world, outstanding. As far as Sunil Narain goes, prolific T20 bowler that he is, but there is an asterisk on Narain as well, Jarrod, which I'm sure you'd probably want to tell us about. Does he make it in your team?
Look, it's certainly there, but I will say this, that he was the first off spinner to legitimately crash T20 cricket. I think everyone else was sort of bowling sliders and weird balls, whereas he literally changed the way the game was played, and then he became a pinch hitter in the top league, or the top 2 of the top leagues in the world. So if that's the case, then for me, he's an all-time player. I don't think that necessarily takes his asterisks away, the same way it doesn't with Andre Russell. But I just don't see how he's not. For me, he's an automatic selection in this team. But I also have 2 spinners because I think spin is better than pace in T20 cricket. Rashid Khan, even blocking him out, doesn't seem to work in T20 cricket. He still gets wickets. So that would be my only difference between those 2. I would have Rashid Khan slightly ahead of him as a bowler at the moment.
But you are picking both. Are you picking both? Well, are you picking both?
I am picking both, yes.
Yeah, I picked both straight away, pretty much. There was some sort of hesitation I had with Rashid, just because I think you instinctively think because of the fact he's so much earlier in his career, maybe he should have done more. But he's got nearly 300 wickets already. Everyone, when he turned up to the IPL, everyone was like, well, this is the big test for him. And there he's averaging low 20s. Economy rate is 6.56 or something like that. And I think he has to get there ahead of Tahir, who's probably not quite proven himself in the IPL, but is worth a mention. Quite to the same extent. Obviously, he's a great bowler. And Badri is another possibility for the impact he had, especially earlier years. But again, probably didn't quite dominate the IPL in the same way that Rashid has managed to. So I think those 2, again, both of them walk in. Just on Narain, there was one stat I found a few weeks ago that I thought was worth a mention, which is between the 6th and the 321st game of his career, his economy never went above 6. Which is just unbelievable.
All right, great. So we've got Narain and Rashid Khan. They both walk into this team. Lasith Malinga, automatic entry, guys?
Yeah, automatic.
Yeah, absolutely. Malinga will be there, although I thought I'll not have him for what he did in the last year's final of the IPL. But obviously, Malinga walks in.
It's interesting that you say that what he did in the final. We tend to think that Malinga won Mumbai the final in 2019, but in a game of 140 or so, he's actually gone for 49 from his 4 overs. So Malinga's effectively almost lost Mumbai the final, but obviously, we remember just that one ball.
But the ball that mattered, he did it. So I think that's what counts.
Based on the fact that we've got such a ridiculously stacked batting lineup all the way, I thought you could probably afford to play a more exciting game and not have necessarily the 5 guns. So I ended up with my attack being the 2 spinners, Malinga, Bravo, and then the 5th bowler is a mixture of Pollard, Russell, and then whichever of Maxwell and Watson we end up picking, which I think is strong enough, especially when we consider how you're going to have to target someone there. You'll end up targeting the all-rounders, but I think you basically only have 8 overs to score off. There are a few that I would.
I don't know who's going to come in first. Is it me or Gaurav who's going to say you win titles by having the best bowling attack? So
yeah.
All right, so then I guess it becomes almost a fight for one spot between Jasprit Bumrah and Mitchell Starc then. So let's keep this chat about Starc v Bumrah, and then let's see if we can find place for both. Jarrod, Starc v Bumrah?
Well, I think Starc's the best T20 bowler in the world, but I also think that he barely ever plays. When I looked at their numbers, Starc still edges Bumrah out a little bit. but Bumrah's now played a lot more games than him and has been tested more frequently and more often, more consistently. I think if it's an all-time 11 at the moment, I would have to say that Bumrah gets in ahead of Stark, and Stark could make it whenever the World T20 is finally played. Stark could win it for Australia and make a complete mockery of what we just said. But it's not our fault. He barely ever plays.
So at the auction table, or when you're actually picking a team, one of the skill sets which always coaches talk about is a 140 plus bowler and a bowler who can swing. So actually Stark ticks all the boxes. Left arm pacer, 140 plus, and he can swing. So if you actually see the other bowler we have is Lasith Malinga. So Bumrah is a great death bowler. So I think what Stark and Bumrah offer are extremely different. Stark can swing the ball early on, and Stark can clean up a tail. Whereas Bumrah is very good at the death. I think slightly better than he's more accurate than Stark is at the death. So when I'm sitting on an auction table, people want a left-arm fast bowler, people want a 140-plus bowler, people want a bowler who can swing early on, because in some grounds, first 3 or 4 overs, you do get swing. So Stark ticks all the boxes. And right now, when I see our 11, actually, we can fit in Stark and Bumrah and have 5 really gun bowlers and hope that we can reduce the batting by 1, because Narine and Rashid and Stark can actually bat a bit. So if Warner can't do it, Pollard can't do it, ABD can't do it, Russell can't do it, I think it's okay.
So just to look at the numbers, this is really interesting. Stark actually has better death numbers than Bumrah. All right. Now, some of that might be he hasn't played as much IPL, so he hasn't played at the pinnacle quite as much. But he averages, when he bowls at the death, he averages 11 with an economy of 8.3. And Bumrah averages 18 at an economy of 8.5. So he's more economical at the death, and he takes more wickets at the death. And at the top of the order, you're right. I mean, I thought Bumrah's numbers were a bit better, but Bumrah averages 36 with the new ball, and Stark averages 25. So neither of them are all-time great new ball bowlers. And maybe that's another interesting thing that we haven't looked at, because Malinga's good at the top, but I don't think Malinga was either was a great new ball bowler either.
I think Narayan anyway takes the new ball. So you have Sunil Narayan as a new ball option more often than not.
That's exactly the reason why I thought, Stark and Bumrah and Malinga could fit, because Bumrah can bowl in the middle, Malinga can bowl in the death, and Stark can bowl up front.
Matt, you're not as sold on Mitchell Stark as some of the others, is the impression that I got.
So it is a really difficult toss-up if it comes down to those two. There's probably a few more names that, like someone like Umar Gul, we should probably give a mention to, who was very good in the early years, especially. Like I remember the World T20 in 2009, he was brilliant. But I'm sort of leaning towards Stark almost, just because of the new ball threat. But that is with the big question mark that we've not actually seen him play. I don't know, a full IPL season or a full World T20 when he's at his absolute best. I think that was one of the big shames of this year, wasn't it? That he didn't get he didn't put his name forward for the auction, because he would have gone for half a team's purse if he had.
Okay, so I guess the issue now is, can you play both Stark and Bumrah at the expense of that extra all-rounder that we had left a spot for? So can you fit both Stark and Bumrah and make it 5 gun bowlers and leave out either Maxwell, Bravo, or Watson as that extra all-round option? Now, you wouldn't ideally pick 5 gun bowlers in a T20 team for the balance, but this is the thing about dream teams and fantasy. You can afford to do that if you have all the best players at your disposal. So, Jarrod, are we going to go for an all-rounder and insist that's better balance to the team, and then pick 4 of these top bowlers and leave out 1? Or can we pick Stark and Bumrah and leave out an all-rounder like a Dwayne Bravo or a Shane Watson or a Glenn Maxwell?
Say if you're playing Maxwell at number 7, then we just have 4 bowlers, and Russell and Pollard are your 5th bowler, which I'm slightly uncomfortable with. Pollard, like Jarrod said, is not your 5th bowler, and Russell, he's not. Yes, he can be a 5th bowler, but I would rather have him as 6th if we have an option, which we have right now. So if you have 5 really gun bowlers and Russell and Pollard as your 6th bowler, I'm fine with it. But if you're not going for one of Stark or Bumrah, I would want my number 7 to be either Watson or Bravo, because they can actually bowl 4 overs.
I think the case for Watson is probably stronger. If we're thinking about the Watson who could bowl mid 80s miles an hour at his peak and was a solid 3 or 4 overs per game, with that option of Russell and / Pollard to complement it, I think that's quite a good option. And I think the balance works quite well if you then have Watson at 3, AB 4, Dhoni 5, at least when they're carded, and then you shuffle around.
Going back to Watson, let's not forget that no one wanted him really at the start of the IPL, and I think he was the MVP in the first season.
Yeah. And
he's been
2013
MVP
as
twice,
well.
Actually, 2008 and 2013. And I was just looking at the stats at his peak, 2008 to 2013. No other all-rounder comes close. 1,785 runs, averages 40 almost with the bat, and averages 26 with the ball. I think that's his peak, and a lot of us remember the Watson of recent, and that's also been pretty amazing actually over the last 2 years. So I think Watson at 3, I'm fine with that. And if you by 1.
I don't think I've ever seen a better performance in a World T20 tournament than his batting in the 2012 tournament. And the fact that he's kind of a running joke in cricket while being an elite sort of limited overs cricketer, I want to give it to him just for the fact that he's now got his own podcast as well. So I think I've got no problem with him batting at 3 because that moves AB to 4, which I'm more than happy with, which moves everyone else down. So if that's the case, if you've got Watson and Russell in your top 7, that means that one of Stark and Bumrah has to go for me.
All right, I'm really happy with that. Right, I've been pushing for Shane Watson, so I'm happy we found a place for him. And again, the sheer longevity of Shane Watson's T20 career, that he continues to be an important part of his T20 franchises. So with due respect to a Dwayne Bravo and a Glenn Maxwell, honorable mentions as they were, they just don't make the final cut for Shane Watson. And since we are giving longevity preference for most of these selections, I think by that logic, we'd go with Jasprit Bumrah over Mitchell Stark. In spite of the quality bowler that Mitch Stark is, he could make us look foolish in World T20s to come. But Jasprit Bumrah over the course of having done it for a longer period of time. Everyone happy with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I go with Bumrah.
I think it works.
So I guess we have our team then, guys, and this has been pretty amicably done. So well done. So we've got Chris Gayle and David Warner in our all-time T20 team as the openers. Shane Watson at 3, AB de Villiers at 4, Dhoni, captain and wicketkeeper, Andre Russell, Kevin Pollard, then 2 gun spinners in Rashid Khan and Sunil Narayan, and finally Lasith Malinga and Jasprit Bumrah. That is the dream team for the all-time T20 team. And again, like I said, looks a good team and done quite amicably. Well done, guys.
The one concern that you end up with is that you have 2 left-handers at the top and then a lot of right-handers. But I think that based on the ability of these guys, that shouldn't be too much of a problem, hopefully.
If we lose to someone because they're doing good matchups, I'd be very disappointed.
The team led by Virat Kohli will expose this team now. The Virat Kohli that you all didn't pick, that I wanted. Anyway, well done, guys. Thank you very much to Jarrod Kimber, Gaurav, Sundararaman, and Matt Roller for this team. And now join us again for another dream team sooner rather than later. And do give us your thoughts on who you think should have made the cut. And we'll be back with more such dream teams in